my name is Sierra Farmer, and today I will be introducing our EGS137 final project, and our topic is Black athletes in the media. At some point, every member of our group has played a sport. As we bonded over this while brainstorming ideas for our final project, we all agreed that Black athletes seem to be presented in the media rather negative. Well, this can result in the misinformation to the public, stereotyping, and can really have a negative impact on an athlete's mental health. In this project, we will discuss the history of the media relating to Black athletes. We will also dive into how the media plays a role in Black athletes' mental health, protests over the decades, and salaries and endorsements of Black athletes. So, first, let's talk about the history of the media representing Black athletes. We're first going to look into the Black press. So, while mainstream white media ignored African American success, Black newspapers showcased Black achievement and Black accomplishments. After the Civil War, the Black press worked diligently to rebuild Black communities and Black political movements. The Black press arose in 1827 and had 40 magazines by the Civil War. While white press magazines never condemned crimes of Black killings, the Black press did. It also ran editorials that compared white superstars and Black athletes, which meant a lot to and inspired the Black readers. Newspaper articles still serve as the primary foundation of which the Negro League history, as we know it today, is based on. So, talking about the Negro League, let's jump into that a bit more. Since Black people were not being accepted into the major and minor baseball leagues due to racism, they formed their own league. The Negro Leagues were any African American baseball teams between 1920s and 1940s. In this picture on the bottom left, we see the Pittsburgh Crawfords team of 1932, including the Hall of Famers Satchel Paige, Josh Gibson, and Oscar Charleston. So, while the Black press were working diligently to uplift Black athletes in the media, the white press was not on the same page. We're going to discuss for a few minutes how the white and Black press differed after the Civil War, more specifically how they both chose to represent Jackie Robinson's debut in Major League Baseball. So the articles that we'll be looking at from the white press are the Daily Worker and New York Times, and the Pittsburgh Courier from the Black press. So while Jackie Robinson was debuting in Major League Baseball, the white press decided to report more on the hard facts about the game rather than the players, and they wanted the right to reserve their opinions. On the other hand, the Black press showed Jackie Robinson as a private, artful person who was different from other Black players as well as white players. The white press also spoke openly about the challenges he faced, more specifically isolation from the team and segregation in his day-to-day life that he faced. The Black press's goal was to make him as visible as possible so that they could show pride of the Black community. A quote from the Daily Worker says, "The muscular Negro minds his own business and shrewdly makes no effort to push himself. He speaks quietly and intelligently when spoken to and already has made a strong impression." On the other hand, the Black press never referred to Jackie Robinson as Negro or anything other than his name, and this was an effort to embrace the significant individuals in the Black community and show support to Robinson's success in the league. Now we're going to look at some statistics from 2015 regarding the Associated Press. In 2015, 7.6% of Associated Press sports editors were Black, and 94% of sports editors were white. 53% of stories involving Black athletes had a negative tone, and 27% of stories regarding white athletes were negative. 66% of crime stories published involved Black athletes, and 22% of crime stories published involved white athletes. 70% of domestic violence stories involved Black athletes, while only 17% of domestic violence stories involved white athletes. So what does this mean? These statistics point to the existence of stereotyping in sports media. And I would like to clarify that I specify crime stories published because it's not that Black athletes committed more crimes, they're just the only ones being reported for these crimes. So not only did African Americans break the color barrier in professional sports, and the fact that Black athletes account for the majority of the participants of several sports today, negative portrayals in the media still linger. Before the Civil Rights Movement, media portrayals of African Americans were far more negative than they are today. But subliminal and unintentional stereotyping still occurs in sports coverage, and it affects not only public perception of Black individuals, but also the mental health of these individuals affected.
Hi, my name is Lorna Sailiai, and we will be transitioning into Black professional athletes and their mental health. Here we'll talk about mental health within Black communities. Due to the systemic injustices that Black Americans have been facing since the beginning of this country, a lot of the community has suffered mentally throughout the years with racial and corporate inequality and political injustices that African Americans have continued to face. According to the article Addressing Mental Health in the Black Community, published by Columbia University, research suggests that the Black adult community is 20% more likely to experience serious mental health problems such as major depressive disorder or generalized anxiety disorder. Mental health and the increase of it within the community is a direct correlation to the lack of resources and affordable resources that are available. We also want to talk about childhood trauma and how people who have faced diversity in their lives have had a difficulty with discussing them or dealing with their problems in a healthy manner. Next, we will be discussing the media's role. On the left, I have averages of the average capacity of different sporting stadiums and the number of viewers watching. So for the NBA, there's about 19,000 people on average in the stadium, and with 1.34 million people watching. NFL stadiums can hold about 70,000 people with 17.1 million people watching via streams. The Major League Baseball stadiums have about 43,000 people on average for capacity and 1.13 million people viewing. For the women's sports, we have the WNBA average capacity, which is 3,500 with 306,000 viewers. Women's tennis opens, average audience is 763,000 people and 2.2 million watching. And lastly, we have pro gymnastics in the Olympics, which seat about 12,000 people with 16.8 million views via streams. This is just the average number of people watching in each sporting event, not to mention all the interviews and press conferences most of these athletes have to partake in. The media in all of its forms occupy a large space in each of these pro athletes' jobs. On the right is a graph of the 2012 Olympics, and on the left of the graph you can see athletes who have partaken in that Olympics, and it shows the number of Facebook and Twitter followers that each one of them have in the millions. So the largest is LeBron James with 17.79 million people on his Twitter followers, and Serena Williams with the least amount with 4.15 million people on Twitter. This is there just to show that with the capacity of people that have taken interest in each of these athletes' sports, they've also taken interest in their personal lives. So not only are they in the public eye for their actual events, they're also constantly being watched, and shows how big the media's role is in any of these athletes' lives. Next, we're going to talk about the ones who have actually spoken out about their mental health. So for the left, we have pro male black athletes. First one, we have an NBA player, DeMar DeRozan, who used to play for the San Antonio Spurs, and he tweets about his depression as shown and says, "This depression got the best of me." There's another NBA player, Paul Pierce, who talks about his depression and anxiety in the public in 2018. We also have a former San Antonio Spurs player, Bruce Bowen, who speaks up about his mental health struggle between growing up and assimilating into the professional culture of the NBA. He talks about the struggles of his childhood and the way he was brought up, and how he had to transform into a person that was supposed to be the ideal NBA player, and the struggles that he had with that. Next, we have Marcus Morris, a former Houston Rockets player. He discussed the difficulties of his childhood, stating, "You got respect in our neighborhood by killing someone. That's how messed up it was." He later discussed his depression, how his depression bouts and anxiety tended to subside when he got traded to the Phoenix Suns in 2013, and he was able to play alongside his twin brother. Lastly, we have Dak Prescott, current Dallas Cowboys quarterback, who spoke out in 20. And next, we have the outcome, which is to have Black professional athletes speak out about mental health will help to destigmatize the stereotypes put on Black athletes. This creates an opportunity for issues like this to be talked about more openly. Mental health within the Black community in America has definitely increased due to all of the injustices that have happened here. And a lot of the times people don't know that they have it, but having people like pro athletes speak about it in the public, it makes it easier to have conversations and to normalize the fact that you can have conversations about subjects that, culturally is taboo. But thank you, and now I'll be handing it off to Jasmine.
Activism in the sports industry. There's a lot of inequality within the sports industry that goes completely unnoticed, and many athletes have chosen not to sit back and watch, but instead to take a stand for what they believe in. Starting with Muhammad Ali. Muhammad Ali changed his name from Cassius Clay, and people routinely refused to call him Muhammad Ali because of his religion and his association with Black separatists. Ali always stood up for his beliefs and for other people within Islam, explaining that Islam is about peace and not war. He spoke up to protect other followers of Islam and himself from this hatred that people were putting upon them and the stereotypes. Later, during the Vietnam War, Ali protested against it, resulting in his heavyweight titles being stripped away from him. He was later convicted of draft evasion and sentenced to 5 years in prison. Due to him being against the war, he pretty much lost all the work that he had worked towards. While being unable to box, Ali decided to give lectures as a form of income. He taught about racism, his faith, and why he made the decision to stand against the Vietnam War, also known as the White Man's War. Later, both Tommie Smith and John Carlos appeared and showed the Black Power salute. In 1968, Tommie Smith and John Carlos were 2 Olympic track stars. After placing, they made their way to the podium. They were shoeless and they were wearing black socks, a single black glove, and Smith wore a black scarf and Carlos wore his tracksuit zipped down and a beaded necklace. The gloves represented Black power, the socks represented Black poverty, the scarf was Black pride, and the unzipped tracksuit was in support of the blue-collar workers. The necklace was for individuals who were lynched or murdered who never got a prayer. Afterward, they were booed and criticized. Time magazine replaced the slogan, faster, higher, stronger, with the words angrier, nastier, and uglier. Tommie and John gave back their medals after they were expelled from the games. And I'm pretty sure that was to, make a point that if you don't want us, we don't want you. Colin Kaepernick in 2016 kneeled during the national anthem in protest to police brutality and any wrongdoings against Black Americans and minorities in America. Before kneeling, Kaepernick would often sit during pre-games, but this pretty much went unnoticed. Kaepernick believed that showing his lack of support for racism in America was more important than a career. He says, and I quote, "I am not going to stand up to show pride in a flag for a country that oppresses Black people and people of color. To me, this is bigger than football, and it would be selfish on my part to look the other way. There are bodies in the street and people getting paid leave and getting away with murder." More and more athletes later decided to take a knee or raise their fist in order to show support to Kaepernick and the cause. Since 2016, Colin Kaepernick hasn't played in the NFL and has focused on his activism and nonprofit organizations. And Serena Williams. Serena Williams is a world-renowned tennis player who has fought routinely for herself and other Black women. Her unique experiences as a Black woman in tennis pushed her to fight against not only racism, but also sexism in the sports industry. In 2018, Serena was fined $10,000 and got a game taken away from her for verbal abuse after calling an umpire a thief. which is normal to say when tennis matches get pretty heated. Serena felt that taking away a game, making her pay that large of a fine, was too much of a penalty. She recognized that no man had ever been punished for calling the umpire a thief, and so she fought against the double standards that were placed upon her. Serena demanded respect and an apology from the umpire and was given $17,000 for disputing these penalties. There are so many athletes who have tried to push back against the oppression within the sports industry and the systems that are in place, and so many of them get forgotten after they do one thing, and people don't realize that these people continue to fight, and I think it's important that we recognize them.
Race's effect on salary in the NBA and the NFL. So, skill positions, specifically the receiver and quarterback positions. At receiver, there are about 215 African American receivers, 25 white receivers, 1 Pacific Islander, 5 either of Latin descent or unknown, with a total of 244 receivers. African Americans on average make about 3,122,000. White Americans make about 2,124,000. Pacific Islanders make about 930K. Other people of Latin descent or other / unknown make about 855,000, and the average for those 244 is 3.104, or 3,104K. The significance of this is that there are a ton more receivers that are African American than there are Caucasian or of any other descent, meaning that there's a higher chance of there being lower tier or receivers who on average will probably bring the average down. But that's also the same thing with the white receivers. Only 3 of the top 30 receivers are white. Highest paid white receiver is making about 16 million and 25K on average. The highest paid African American receiver is making 22,500,000. For QBs, there are a total of 12 African American QBs, 53 white American QBs, 1 Pacific Islander, 3 of either Latin descent or unknown, and a total of 69. So on average, African American QBs tend to be the highest paid QBs, being at 15.68 million. White QBs, there are 53, so there's a high density of them, at 9.21 million. Pacific Islander QB, which is one by the name of Tua Tagovailoa, who makes 8.26 mil. The QBs of Latin descent or other make about 827K, and the total 69 on average make about 10,300K. This is very substantial because, as we know, the lower the QB number, or the lower the number to average out, the higher the number will be. Speaking off of a math standpoint, being that of the starting QBs, majority of these QBs, other than maybe 3 of them, so about 9 starting QBs in the NFL, are Pro Bowl, African American Pro Bowl receivers. Quarterbacks, or they have made it to the Pro Bowl. So that's one thing to take in consideration. White QBs, there is a high density, which means the number can be significantly lower, especially when it comes to the lower tier QBs. There's only 1 Pacific Islander, and there's only 3 that are unreally determined. The NBA and the CBA agreement. In 2019, The CBA and the NBA agreed to a new TV deal, inflating the cap by almost $8 million in one season, with an increase in the max player, and the max a player can earn with at least 7 to 9 years of experience by almost 202%. What is the NBA and CBA agreement? What is the NBPA actually? So in 1953, the NBPA was founded by 3 NBA legends: Bob Cousy, Tom Heinsohn, and Oscar Robertson, who was the Big O. Pretty much, they founded it to be a union for NBA players. As of right now, the most notable NBA player that has been the NBPA president was Chris Paul. He just recently resigned, so their leadership consists of CJ McCollum of the New Orleans Pelicans, Andre Iguodala of the Golden State Warriors, Harrison Barnes of the Sacramento Kings, Bismack Biyombo of the Charlotte Hornets, Malcolm Brogdon of the Indiana Pacers, Jaylen Brown of the Boston Celtics, Kyrie Irving of the Brooklyn Nets, Garrett Temple, I don't know exactly what team he plays for, and Grant Williams, who plays for the Boston Celtics. And pretty much NBA teams either have 1 or 2 representatives who fight on behalf of that team's players for their civil rights and things of that nature. In the NBA and the NFL, there have been discrepancies in the highest paid. On average, in the 1960s in the NBA, about $162,000 were paid to the NBA players. In modern day money terms, back then that would be about $15K. In the 90s, Patrick Ewing made the most money as an African American, making about $4.25 million, with that being about 9.15 mil a season. The highest paid white American was Chris Mullin, who at that time was making $2.85 million, with today being $6.13 million. In 2022, Steph Curry is the highest paid African American of African American descent, being $53,838,416. Luka Doncic, who is only 24, is making $41,412,000. Main difference here is Curry has more experience than Luka. Luka is only in his 4th season, whereas Curry was drafted in 2019, being his 13th season in the NBA. So in the NFL, on average, there was no data available for the 1960s. In the 1990s, Randall Cunningham being the highest paid African American player, who was a QB. These are all just random positions. But in the NFL, the highest paid position is the quarterback position. He made about $2.56 mil a season in 90s money, and about $5.5 million in today's currency. The highest paid player in the 90s in general, which was Joe Montana, made about $3.25 mil a season in the 90s terms, and about $7 mil a season in today's terms. The highest paid quarterbacks, or the highest paid players in the NFL today, are 2 quarterbacks by the name of Deshaun Watson and Kirk Cousins, which they both make about $35 million a season. The main difference between these two is Deshaun Watson is considered to be a top 15 QB, whereas Kirk Cousins is considered to be a bottom 15 QB in the NFL.